Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to another chat with Matt. So today marks a little bit of a grim milestone in the UK because we are exactly 1 year to the day since we went into a lockdown. And I think we've all felt over the course of the last year that the way that we work, the way we interact with people, the way we engage in generally has had to change for many, many reasons. So I thought we should talk a little bit about communication today on the chat, and I'm delighted to be welcoming back for the third or fourth time. I'm starting to lose count now. It's getting embarrassing. But James Barton, Mental Group CTO, welcome back.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here again, as always.
Absolutely. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much. Very well. I love the spring, and it's finally getting a bit warmer, although obviously over here in England it's freezing in the mornings and then baking hot in the afternoons, so I'm having to change my clothes 3 times. Apart from that, fine.
Yeah, I think baking hot in the afternoon's a little bit of an exaggeration, but we'll go with it.
Just 12 degrees in England is baking hot, isn't it?
Yeah, true enough. Shorts weather, as I would say. My wife would disagree, but shorts weather nonetheless. So I was on the middle of a call, or in the middle of a call earlier on, and I get this message popping up from you going, I've got a great idea for the chat this afternoon. Why don't we talk about email is going away, email is dead? And I thought, why not? So give me some on that. Why do you think email is dying out?
Well, what started my thinking was, I'm not sure if you guys were aware, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a major security breach with Microsoft Outlook or Microsoft Exchange servers globally. There were many organizations got breached, and part of it was the fact that the protocols for security and email are a bit outdated. You can do things like spoofing and bits and pieces. Don't worry, I'm not going to go technical on you. Good. It just reminded me about how old the concept of email is and how far away we've come from that in the way we should be communicating. And I've noticed more and more, I live now in what we would call in IT walled gardens. So things like Slack and Teams are these microcosms of communication that live as walled gardens. Very difficult to communicate with people outside of those walled gardens, but internally we collaborate and we communicate very well. I'm also then seeing huge increases in the use of WhatsApp as a communication method. I'm seeing it more and more on websites and ways of communication, and just got me thinking, well, from the security point of view, it's outdated. From an internal point of view, it's outdated. Why on earth are we still communicating with our customers in a way that appears to be outdated? Now, it might seem to be quite controversial, but I'm just thinking, are we doing the right thing? We often use, we fall back on email all the time as being the thing that we go to first to communicate with our clients. My question is should we, or should we be looking to work otherwise? Because more and more, particularly things like Teams, where you can work inside a customer base, where you can get the teams connected. You've done that before, haven't you, Matt, with some of our clients, where you connected, and the communication just goes to the roof. It's so much easier to communicate and discuss and collaborate. My question, I just feel that and I am a real slave to my email. It's just outdated. I just would love to just get a discussion and see what you thought.
It's a fascinating because I think, well, is email dead? And then I look down on my inbox and realise I've got too many emails in there, because obviously people are still using the medium. So actually change the paradigm slightly and think about the effectiveness of communication, particularly in what we do, in customer engagement. And actually my perspective on this is it seems to be the least most effective way to communicate. So whether you're using WhatsApp or Teams, 5 years ago we were using Skype within our business. Before we moved to Office 365, yeah, absolutely, and now it's obviously far more secure. But my perspective is it seems to be the least effective way, on one hand, and then on another hand, it seems to be the most effective way of misreading what someone's trying to tell you, because you can't put intonation into an email, you can't really put emoticons and everything else in it. So. Is it the wrong question? Is the question not, is email dead? Is the right question, is it the most effective way for us to continue to communicate and collaborate? What's your thought on that?
Well, I mean, it's funny. One of the great things about email is that it's asynchronous. And what I mean by that is I can send a message to you, Matt. You might not read it for an hour or two, then you can get back to me. And we can have this to and fro conversation without having to be there in the moment. One of the challenges with the collaboration platforms that we work with is it demands your attention immediately. So there's got to be that balance. And this is where I'm finding other platforms like Monday.com or Asana, or these where you've got collaboration built in around tasks, really, really helpful. But again, from an angle of what is the right tool for effective communication? You can't beat a phone call. Amount of times I've struggled to get hold of someone through an email backwards and forwards for 2 weeks, and then just give a ring, and you ring them, you get through first time, and you can have the conversation. It's sorted in 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, I've wasted 2 weeks of my time going backwards and forwards on emails. So I think the thing that we need to think about is it's the right tool for the right person at the right time, and that can often be very difficult. And because I find it more and more difficult to manage all the different platforms I have to manage, because I've got messages coming across. Well, my phone looks like it's got measles half the time, and if we're finding that internally, what's it like for the customer? Because they do the same thing.
And I think it goes a little bit broader than that, in that, again, a limiting self-belief was maybe the younger generations didn't like to pick up the phone and talk as much. It was more to do with instant messaging and using things like Snapchat and those tools and so on. And yet about a week ago, I was talking to my sons, as you all know, James, they're 17, 19 and 21. And they're using a lot more FaceTime, a lot more voice dialing, particularly over the last, say, 5 months, because of that social isolation, which came about because of the pandemic. So I wonder to what extent you think that the pandemic and the events of the last 12 months have also started to shape the way that we communicate, not just with our customers, but with our friends, with our family, and so on.
I definitely think that the pervasive use of video calls like the FaceTimes and even WhatsApp and Zoom, it has increased. Obviously it has. But I also find the negative. A lot of people say they feel very tired at the end of a day. I mean, I can spend an entire day, a 10-hour, 12-hour day, and every hour is a Zoom call. By the end of it, you're evaporated. But at the same time, you ring a customer, they're actually delighted to hear from you. So I think there's an internal, external perspective going on. And I think sometimes we're so quick to jump on a team or a Zoom call, we forget the phone exists. And it's actually much easier because you could just ring them and get straight through rather than trying to send an invite through. It's really interesting. You made me really think, because of the way that you position that, what's the most effective communication. I think the takeaway for me on this is really to stop and think before I communicate with somebody and go, what is the best way for me to communicate for that individual? Because I know, for example, my technical director, Mark, if I phoned him, he would pass out because he wants to have emails because that's the way he's built, right? But I also know for other people in the organization, a phone call is the most effective way to get something done. And so I think it's just that stopping and not defaulting. I'm very guilty of defaulting to email because it's easy, because I can rattle them away. I can think a thought, send it off, it's gone. And I don't actually really think about the end user. I just think, well, they've got that now. Rather than thinking, is it the right time? Is it the right communication method? I think that for me would be the takeaway, because if I'm doing that internally, I'm also doing it with my customers, and that's not going to be a great thing.
So that's the message, isn't it? Step back, think about the message you want to get across and how the individual wants to be communicated to, particularly if it's a customer or colleague. It's not about us, it's actually about the other person. So we've got to flex our style accordingly to make sure that our communication is effective for them, which in turn will make it effective for us. So we've got to make sure that we flex that accordingly. But we can be too quick to communicate via a default communication method because it ticks a box. Email being a good example of that. I'll send that email off to a customer and then it's done. But it's not done, it's gone. And there's a difference between being done and gone, because you've got to get something done once you get the reply. And I think we've sometimes got to,
and that's the challenge for people like me, Matt, who are very I'm I'm task orientated as an individual. So give me a to-do list and I'll work through it happily. And I think that's my problem. You think I've just got the task is done, email sent, I can tick that off the list without actually thinking, was that the most effective way to get it done? So I really appreciate that challenge. It's very good.
So I'm hearing then that the sort of takeaway from this chat, not least for us all to sort of reflect about how we're communicating. Are we communicating in the right way? I always start these chats with how are you? You know, you can't really get that sense of a how are you via an email in the same way. The takeaway is don't rush into communication, give it some thought, make sure that it's got a level of interdependency between you and the person you're communicating with, before you go ahead and just almost get your head down and transact.
It's funny, you made me laugh just then because you said you can't do the how are you via email. Yeah, I think I'd probably start every email with, hi, how are you? Hope you're well, or some other platitude, which is very different because when you said to me earlier, how are you? I know that you genuinely cared.
Yeah.
But in an email, it feels like an open platitude. It's almost like saying, have a nice day at the end of an email. We all know what that means. So, you know, it's just interesting how different you could say the same thing over a telephone call or a call like this, very different to when you do it via an email. Again, thank you, Matt. That's really helpful.
Yeah, that's the takeaway. And I think everybody who's listening and watching, before you get into that communication stream, think about the person you're communicating to. Maybe put yourself in their shoes, think, well, how would they like to communicate with me today? Would they like to talk to me? Would they like to receive an email because it's something that needs to be tracked? You know, is it a WhatsApp? What is it? Rather than just going into this is the way I'm going to do that. Let's challenge our thinking. Let's do something differently and see if we get a different result. Yeah, James, always a pleasure talking to you. I think that's quite even for me, I'm thinking about, you know, the number of emails I've sent in the last hour and think, well, actually, was that the right way? Maybe not. So it's got me thinking. So I appreciate you bringing the subject of this chat today.
Yeah, great.
And
thanks,
for the rest,
appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time out again, however many times it is. I do not recall, but I always appreciate you taking the time out nonetheless.
Pleasure.
For everybody else, as we go into the spring and we go into spring in the northern hemisphere, and you know into the autumn or the fall in the southern hemisphere, let's hope that things continue to improve for us all. In the meantime, stay safe. Thank you for taking the time out, and see you very soon again on another chat with Matt. Thank you.